The James Show Podcast.
So let's talk about the National Guard being deployed in D.C. First, I think we all agree that D.C.'s crime rate higher than most towns. In some metrics, the worst in the country. And it would be nice if it was lower. Is it also, as libertarian as I am about, government overreach and stay within the confines of their power. Well, this is the one town that the federal government actually does have control over. I have no problems with them sending in whoever they want into D.C. The federal government, really the executive branch of the federal government, really runs that place. And that's okay, because that's how it was written in the Constitution. It's supposed to be 10 square miles. And then for some reason, we lost the Virginia side of it that's a whole nother show. So it's really just the rump, the what's left over part of what was supposed to be the 10 square mile, just on the Maryland side of the original plans. So really, you could make the case that he could send in the National Guard to like Arlington Cemetery and the parts that were on the other side of the river too. But let's not get too far in the weeds here. Let's just deal with what we have at hand. So we were hearing yesterday, the reasoning for this and what do they plan to do? Well, there's a twofold. There's a two-prong approach that they talked about in the press conference yesterday. Donald Trump talked about putting troops on the street and getting more people out there to clean the place up and lessen crime and show a police presence and try and get people to act right. The other approach is Jeanine Pirro, old Judge Jeanine from the Fox Weekend show and sometimes a guest elsewhere. She's going to be the prosecutor there, and they're going to take a look at what they can do about things like cashless bail and other just absolutely terrible ideas that they think are contributing to the decay of civil society outside of the Capitol in D.C. Now, my experience in D.C. is quite limited. I've been a couple times, and both times was for work, and the only time I got outside of that little area where the Capitol and the White House and George Washington, the college is right next to the White House. I only ventured outside of that in D.C. proper one time because I misread the directions. Apparently there's streets repeat. There's like two different E streets and then there's two different 19th streets. There's a east and a west. And so I was either on the wrong 19th or on the wrong E, and I ended up in a terrible neighborhood. So that's as close as I've seen. Now, the one time when I went, it was because I was working on a different radio company, and the guy who comes on after us was doing some speech with Tom DeLay at George Washington. We all got invited, and we were going to do our shows from there and whatnot. And he drove in from New York, and he was New York City. He was very careful to get in a nice parking garage right next to George. It's like kind of corner to George Washington University and the property where the White House itself is. And he drove his Jeep down, and it has a ragtop. And he's like, yeah, I had to park it 6 stories up in the most expensive parking garage I could find. Or else if I left it just on the street, somebody would come by and knife it and just steal the change out of the console. And so we went out, and when we got back the next day, we were all doing our radio setup stuff. It turns out someone had actually gone into the garage, knifed open the ragtop on his Jeep, and stole the change out of his console. Just like he had joked about the night before. So, okay, in my tiny little experience, it's really bad in D.C. And the weird part is how drastically it changes. You go across the river into the Arlington. I was in Old Town Arlington at the NRA studios. Awesome. Looked like a movie set. It's all brownstone sidewalks. They got brick streets. There's trees that are growing up that look like they're artificial intelligence. They're so perfect. So we know it doesn't have to be awful around there. It's only awful, not in the suburbs, but in this tiny little area that these nerds in D.C. control. And remember, the voting public of D.C., the people who are choosing their leaders, are the same people who reelected Marion Barry to the city council after he got caught with a prostitute and smoking crack rocks on camera. So there's nothing constitutional that's bothering me about it. There's nothing about the function or the reason why they're trying to go in. Yeah, that's a terrible place with an absurdly high murder rate. And I'd like to see something done about it. I'd like to see something done about bail reform. I'd like to see something done about light sentencing and the light hand of the justice system. If we can help, cool. I guess the real concern some people might have is that, well, he might do this in other cities. Well, he might not. But that's Karen Bass was talking about her experience with the National Guard being deployed in L.A., and she was saying they were a test case.
You absolutely expect a federal response when we have over 200 countries here, meaning heads of state of over 200 countries. Of course you have the military involved. That is routine. But that is not the military driving up and down the streets of the city like, unfortunately, the Marines did. You remember, we didn't just have 4,000 National Guard members. We also had I think it was about 700 U.S. Marines. Completely inappropriate, a political stunt, and that was not needed. And I believed then, and I believe now, that Los Angeles was a test case, and I think D.C. is a test case as well, for the president to say, well, we can take over your city whenever we want, and I'm the commander-in-chief, and I can use the troops whenever we want. I think that is an abuse of our troops, and I think it's an overreach of presidential powers for the president to literally take over law enforcement in a city that has not requested the help.
All right, so there's both sides of the argument. Do you think this is the right thing to do? Do you think it'll work? Do you think this is really just a test case and Donald Trump's going to start taking over other major cities after this? A lot going on. I got a lot of good questions for a DPS officer. Lieutenant Chris Oliveris is coming back on from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Welcome back, sir. First thing I want to ask you about President Trump's order to crack down on Mexican cartels. And we have a lot of cartel activity that's sort of intermingled in regular old Texas society. Is this going to affect us here in North Texas any?
Hey, James. So thanks for having me on. So obviously, with this new administration, they're really cracking down on the cartels. And I think we first saw that when they first came into the office, and they also put pressure on China. They put pressure on the Mexican government to really put a control on the cartels and really try to decrease the flow of illicit drugs coming across the border, especially illegal immigrants. The flow of illegal immigrants has decreased tremendously. And I'll give you an example. Of course, the last 4 years in Texas, we were averaging anywhere from 8 to 10,000 illegal border crossings a day. Right now, ever since the new administration took office, we're averaging anywhere from 150 to 200 illegal border crossings. So a big decrease as far as in human trafficking, as far as illegal immigrants coming across the border. So that's going to impact the cartels. That's going to impact their bottom line. It's going to impact their profits. And what we're seeing in Texas is a direct reflection of that, especially what we're doing on the border with our DPS troopers through Operation Lone Star. We still continue to maintain a presence on the border, continue to crack down on the cartels. And because of the change of the administration, stricter consequences, and really designating them as a foreign terrorist organization, I think that was one of the biggest steps in really going after the cartels, is the administration actually designating them as a foreign terrorist organization. That really leverages the powers of national emergency to go after these cartels, to freeze their assets, financial assets, to use military assets as well as local and federal law enforcement. So on the U.S. side, especially in Texas, that's one thing that we want to focus on, is really identifying any type of cartel activity in the state of Texas, organized crime, illicit drugs, and really try to dismantle those operations, those networks, which we're doing right now through our border operations and focusing on interior enforcement, also monitoring activity along the border, that in itself. Because, again, the cartels, they will adapt. They will adapt to the changes in policy. They will adapt to administrations. We've seen it over the years. Right now, obviously, they want to try to not have so much attention on them with fentanyl. So that's why we're seeing more of an increase, especially in South Texas, with cocaine and methamphetamine that's being smuggled across the border. So different changes. But nonetheless, I would say that right now the cartels are much weaker than they have been in the last 4 years. And right now is the time to really go after them, not just only the leadership, but actually the financial institutions, the money. That's what we need to focus on, that are really weakening the cartels even more.
Well, you're a DPS officer. What's your thoughts on the D.C. takeover by the feds?
Obviously, there's, the purpose of that was behind because of the crime increase and people don't feel safe. I think that happens anywhere. And I think if people really don't feel safe, especially at our capital, I would think that they would want more presence. If that requires military presence, then that'll be the case. But I think now what's happening, especially in D.C., really shows, again, the administration really taking control and trying to keep D.C. safe, trying to reduce the crime even more so. to keep everybody safe in that area. And I think that goes across the board anywhere, especially in Texas, especially in other parts of the country. We want to feel safe. I think the people, they want to feel safe in their state. They want to be able to go out, be with their families, and not have to worry about being carjacked or robbed by juveniles. And I think it's one thing that's been happening in D.C. So we'll see what happens in those 30 days with the military presence. But I do believe that it is a step in the right direction in trying to reduce crime and also to help and make people feel safe in D.C.
Well, that was kind of my next question. Will it work? And you just kind of sort of answered that anyway. Thank you very much. I appreciate the insight from the DPS. Lieutenant Chris Oliveira is on the James Show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, what do you think? 800-288-9227. Are you okay with what Trump's doing in D.C.? This is Donna in Dallas. You're on WBAP. Oh, you're listening to the radio. Turn off the radio. Talk to your phone. All right, well, we'll come back to her then when she figures it out. Jason, Flower Mound, you're on WBAP. Go.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag for me because they're not really taking over any city. In Los Angeles, they were interfering with government function on ICE. So even the National Guard troops out there were not for the purpose of doing anything for law enforcement other than to establish safe zones.
I know, but they've got to treat him like Hitler, bro. They've got to, everything's Hitler, everything's scary and fascist and radical takeover and unprecedented.
Well, technically, he could actually establish martial law in D.C., but he hadn't done that.
Yeah, so what's the holdup? What's your reservation about this?
Reservation's just timing on this. I'm not quite sure why now. I mean, when they say crime is down 30% in D.C., that's very misleading because if you don't prosecute shoplifting and you don't prosecute marijuana possession or whatever, you're going to have an instantaneous drop in crime. The question is what is the actual drop in violent crime? In Washington, D.C., it's still very, very high on violent crimes. In fact, didn't a senator get attacked up there recently or a congressman?
Yeah, we've had a few instances. Also, the D.C. guy that shot the two Jewish diplomats, like right outside of the museum. There was the guy that was in Doge that got mugged. Not Big Balls, but I think it was a different one. And so there's also the point that gets brought up when they bring out the chart. They're like, yeah, this is the lowest it's been in 30 years. Well, no, not the lowest it's been. There was a nice little span there where it was lower about 10, 15 years ago. So I don't know. It depends on what you measure, how you measure it, what time scale you choose. And just like almost anything, statistics can be manipulated by either side to sort of tell a different story. But to act like... One
more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe it's just a warning. If you want to defund the police, we got the National Guard we can bring in too.
Yeah, I mean, I always like the part where if you're suffering because of your bad policies, we should let you suffer good and hard for it. Keep defunding the police. See what happens. Anyway, that's probably a little crude for statecraft, but I think it would work. And the thing you're supposed to be scared about, the thing that makes Trump just so Hitler today, is that he's using the National Guard troops in D.C., and they're going to take a review, take over some of the functions there that seem to be failing the citizens of D.C., and while they don't actually have the argument against it for now, he has the right to do it. They're saying, well, crime's not really that bad. Okay. Well, he doesn't need to do it. Okay. Well, he could do this in other cities. Okay. That all sounds fine to me. It doesn't bother me a bit. 800-288-9227. Your thoughts on Trump taking over D.C. Donna in Dallas, you're on WBAP.
Hello. No, I do not think that anything he's doing is incorrect or wrong. It would be anything he was doing they would think was incorrect or wrong. If I was living in that, I think that our capital should be known as someplace to come and be safe. And I don't know why nobody else thought about it until just now. But it's because it's him that we're going to have a heart attack over it. So go for it, in my opinion.
So the question becomes... how long does he leave them in there? Like, what's the metric of success where you turn it back over to the locals?
I mean, I don't know. They're making up the crime. Everybody's making up the crime numbers, and I'm assuming he's going to be able to tell that things are improving. I would think when you have the National Guard there that people are going to be a little bit more on their best behavior. I don't think it'll take him too long to figure it out. But I think just the presence there and knowing that he meant to do something and he actually did it, that I think is going to make a big difference.
Well, I've also
do that anywhere.
I think a lot of us were burned during COVID when they didn't ever give us like a goalpost. Like, okay, we're going to be locked down to slow the spread. Okay, but what does that look like? Is it a number of cases per day? Is it a number of deaths per day? Is it a number of people vaccinated? What metric are you using to measure success so I know when this thing is supposed to end? And I don't know what the answer is for this DC thing. So I would like to know that. I would like for them to come out and say that. But other than that, this is constitutionally sound. I think it might help. I'm not. Let me give the other side here. And thank you very much for your call, Donnie. You're making all good points there. So let me play a little devil's advocate and just, I'm not being a butthead. I'm just trying to flesh out the negatives on this, because I think worst case scenario is he's going to send the troops into DC and he's going to send in the National Guard and he's going to have Jeanine Pirro try and rat out some terrible jurisprudence in the court system. But what if it doesn't help? You know, what if this is just something that even if the troops are there, the second you pull them out, does the criminality return immediately? Because there's the deal of dealing with the criminals as they are now. There's also the process by which you've arranged society so you'll have fewer criminals in the future. And so, look, the criminals that are already produced, we know how to deal with them. We go catch them, we put them in handcuffs, and we put them in a box for a very long time. But that's a temporary solution if there's more criminals that are just coming up behind them, that are graduating into adulthood every day there. And so I don't know if this is going to do anything to address the fact that new criminals are in the making as it stands, and, you know, the failed parts of our society. And it's in the failed parts of any society. This isn't a white thing, black thing, urban thing, rural thing. There's just going to be some dedicated percentage of different demographics that are going to be failures. They're going to be addicts. They're going to be criminals. They're going to be thieves. They're going to be really stupid in the bell curve of IQ, and there's nothing you can do about it. These people are always going to be with us. Is there a way that we can, number one, minimize their creation, and number two, minimize their negative impact once they're created? And I think we're only dealing with half of that equation here. And so if you wanted me to play devil's advocate and try and tear this apart and come up with something critical of this, I think at best you're dealing with something that is a symptom of a bigger problem that's not being dealt with. And it all comes back to something cultural. It all comes back to, you know, the lack of family formation, the destruction of the nuclear family, the destruction of the biological mother and father unit. But there's no unit of the military that you can send in to fix that. There's no judge that you can fire and replace to fix that. This is a problem that's not necessarily with the way we've arranged government, but a way we've rearranged our society and our culture. And that's not going to be so easy to fix. And I can already tell you, back to school shopping was a little bit more expensive this year than it was last year. Walmart got me good. I got 4 kids and it was about $300. I know. Ted Rossman, bank rate analyst, coming on the James Show to break down, just starting with like the official number, a little more official than James felt like it was more. The inflation number came out today and it's still running a little hot, but less than expected. Your thoughts?
Yeah, we have really not seen the impact that we had feared just yet for tariffs. I mean, some say that higher prices could still be coming later in the year, but for back to school, it's actually been so far so good. The National Retail Federation says the average kindergarten through 12th grade back to school shopper is spending $858 this year. That's down from $875 last year. This is inclusive of electronics, clothes, shoes, backpacks, school supplies, kind of an all-in number. Prices have stabilized, though. And we found in our survey that 30% of back-to-school shoppers say that inflation is changing their habits this year. It was 41% 3 years ago when inflation peaked. So people are feeling a little bit better.
Well, I remember there was the COVID years, and whenever we came out of that weird fog, I remember the prices seemed to have jumped. And we haven't seen as big of a jump really in the last couple of years, but I still feel like it's getting a little worse every year, Ted.
Well, there's a cumulative effect to inflation. Even if the Fed gets inflation down to its 2% target, prices are still growing. They're just not growing as fast. Right now, inflation's in the high 2s or low 3s, depending on the metric you're looking at. But a lot of times when I talk to consumers about prices, people say, well, things still feel expensive, and they're still waiting for things to roll back to, say, pre-COVID pricing.
Oh, that's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, true deflation, prices falling, is really actually a bad sign for the economy. Really what the Fed wants is for prices to grow, but just to grow more slowly. And, there's some good and some bad in here. Wage growth has been going up. It's actually outpaced inflation for the past few years. But then again, that cumulative toll, the fact that things cost about 25% more now than they did 4 years ago, that's why people are not feeling great about the economy. So it's kind of possible that both could be true at the same time, that inflation could be coming down, at least the rate of change could be coming down, but prices themselves are still elevated and people still feel like things are expensive.
All right. Well, we're talking with Ted Rossman, bank rate analyst, about the cost of really just inflation hitting you from all directions here. Now, Ted, I'm going to be pessimistic on inflation until we do something about the deficit. As long as we're printing an extra $2 trillion a year, I don't expect this to ever be anything decent or below 2%.
Well, there's a lot of ways that this affects people. I mean, if inflation remains elevated, the Fed keeps interest rates high, it's more expensive to borrow. So the average credit card rate right now is around 20%. That's close to a record high. Mortgage rates are in the mid 6s. That's better than we saw a couple years ago, but it's still much higher than most of what we saw throughout the 2010s and early 2020s. Car loans are still expensive. We may start to get some Fed rate cuts soon, which could make it less expensive for the government to borrow, but also, importantly for us consumers, cheaper for us to borrow. The progress is going to be slow on products like credit cards. Those rates are just starting from such a high point, but it can help the mortgage market. I mean, if we see mortgage rates dip below 6, that's a psychological barrier. It feels like we're moving in the right direction, but a bit more slowly than many would like.
Yeah, well, don't talk to me about that. I've got one of those amazing COVID mortgages at 3%, sir, so I'll just keep that as long as I can. Ted Rossman, bank rate analyst, thank you very much for being on the James Show, sir.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, and good luck with the back-to-school shopping, y'all. You do not have to get her a North Face backpack just so she's one of the cool kids at school. It works just as well as a North Face backpack. When you go to the Buc-ee's and they have those hot and cold bags, the one that have like the foil on the inside, and it looks like a regular shopping bag with a zipper on top, that works just as good. Yeah, I know your daughter looks like a pauper, but it's important to teach her thrift, efficiency. All right, hey, Rangers fans out there. Texas Rangers are taking on the Cleveland Guardians Saturday, August 23rd at Globe Life Field. The first 20,000 fans in attendance to this game are going to get a miniature replica of Adrian Beltre's newly unveiled statue presented by Globe Life. So if you want to get a miniature replica of the new Beltre statue, you got to go to Globe Life Field to the game that's coming up on August 23rd. Now, you can go ahead and go buy your tickets right now at TexasRangers.com, or if inflation's been kicking you in the teeth, try and win a pair from us. Text the word Rangers to 800-288-9227. It's the same phone number I give out for if you want to call into the show. So if you have it saved in your phone or if you've ever called before, you can just go grab that number. Text the word Rangers to 800-288-9227.
The James Show Podcast.